When the situation with Analog and Asimov's contracts first appeared, I was trying to give the science fiction publication benefit of the doubt because I've seen how these people rile up mobs on Blue Sky. They're completely irrational and they just want to cancel somebody so hard that they just keep going and going and going. But the behavior of Asimov's and Analog has been very, very suspect, to say the least. I have the largest blog in science fiction and fantasy. This is one of the largest channels in science fiction and fantasy. I attempted to reach out to the people at those magazines, the editors there. They would not respond to me about the contract situations here. Now, as a person who would have advocated for them, that seems very not smart to do, but this is how they act within science fiction and fantasy. So we have a group that now is seeming to have bad contract language for authors for short stories, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. Short stories are not super profitable. There's not a lot you can do there. And so what are they trying to take from the authors that the authors are upset about? And why would they make this big of a stink about it when it's obviously hurting their already shrinking market? Now, these magazines have been on the wayside for a lot of years. These used to be getting millions of readers out there in their subscriptions, and they're down to the thousands. In fact, I think monthly they sell less than my books sell a lot of the time, which is pretty sad because these were staple institutions out there. Now, PA Cornell has written an entire blog about it, talking about exactly what's going on in her situation, and we're going to cover this. And I will talk about the situation from what we've uncovered as well. Please hit the like and subscribe button of all things science fiction and fantasy, guys. This is your real sci-fi and fantasy news. I appreciate you being here. My name's John Delarose. I am a #1 best-selling science fiction author, as well as a #1 best-selling nonfiction author at this point. Thank you guys for the new release this week. But if you like science fiction, if you like a lot of fun, I think you'll enjoy my Justified Saga of the Nano-Templar trilogy. Starts right here. It is badass action, space crusading at its finest. And I will be following up on this in the future. I have a grand plan for something, I like to go a little too arty with things sometimes, but I think you're going to really enjoy my thoughts on things because it adds a big depth to the universe once I get there. I have a lot of stuff on my plate, so it's not going to happen that soon, but I will get there eventually. For now, this entire trilogy is complete. Read it on ebook, print, or audio. It's available on all three for you. That's in the description below. I also have a lot of ways to support in the description below if you want to check out my online bookstore, see something else. Thanks, guys, so much for supporting us here. Okay, so here is what PA Cornell says. Subscribers of my newsletter usually comes out on the first of each month, but then I make an exception. I recently wrote about my experience following an acceptance from Analog magazine in early March of this year. First in this post, and then with a complete timeline of the whole ordeal in this post. As I write this, I can tell you the 7-month-long saga of a tale has finally come to an end. So she wrote about this, and she was having problems with the contracts, and she was talking to them, and she pointed out a few reasons about the contract, and actually laid out a timeline, and I forget which post had the timeline. This one here, she submitted a story November 2024. We're into September 2025 as of the recording of this. March 6th received an acceptance. She's excited. This is her first time being accepted at Analog. April, she received a contract. After reading it, she noticed several non-standard clauses confusing legalese. She says she's going to ask for clarification. A day later, she said she sat with this contract. She writes them again, asking for the removal of a couple clauses, including the now infamous moral rights clause. And that's one that I actually defended at first, saying that a lot of these magazines are asking for rights to reproduce things into best of anthologies afterwards or audio versions without, they don't want extra approval from the authors in those sort of contexts. And that makes a lot of sense given the shrinking market and them trying to have to market things different ways. And of course, publish things different ways, right? She also requests an addition of an AI clause, which I'm guessing means she doesn't want any AI art attached to her story or something like that. That's pretty ridiculous, and I don't think I don't think there's anything on that. But this moral rights clause, while I assumed there was not much of a problem with it, just because of what moral rights are in general, there's been more and more authors talking about this, and there seems to be a massive problem because of just Analog and Asimov's inability to communicate or even act in good faith towards people. Now, since everybody's against it, you would think they'd just take it out at this point, or at least change it to try to make people happy on this level. That's it. It's her birthday. She gets a response on May 28th, is a month later, a single line saying they're reviewing my requested revisions. This is a month later. That's crazy. That's a long time for a single short story. June 3rd, they respond with some suggested wording changes on some of the clauses. And, of course, they said that there was a merch clause. Was there an error? And the writers could negotiate its removal, which, as I was aware of, is another thing. Now they're selling merch based on the stories or whatever, which is kind of an odd thing. The authors should have the right to that themselves. If I were not a member, I might have been aware of the fact that I could ask for it to be removed, etc. At this point, I'm pretty jazzed about the acceptance to a dream market since they seem willing to make changes. I agree to look at the full updated contract. One of the things I had requested was a termination clause. Not having that clause means the right to be waiting indefinitely while your story sits in limbo, unable to sell it elsewhere and not seeing it published. Along with the contract, they send a one-line note assuring me I don't need a termination clause because the story will likely be published before the end of the year. They're essentially asking me just to trust them. And this seems to be what's been going on, that just trust us, bro. And then they don't actually follow through. And I, again, don't understand this. This is over, like, short stories, a few $100s of payments to a writer, just putting things out there. It's like, you got to get the stories through. What are you doing? This is something that's bizarre at this point. And what are they trying to obtain from this? It ends up being shady because they won't be forthright about it, and they won't be transparent about what they're doing. It's coming further with again, they're saying they don't typically include terminations or rights reversions and tell me I should just trust them. They agree to some of my wording changes, but there's no mention of striking or moral language, etc. June 13th, saying I'm pretty surprised at their response. I call out that their clause 10 came from their own approved contracts, and then I tell them I don't understand their refusal to include a termination rights reversion clauses, since they seem so sure they can guarantee timely publication of my story. I mentioned I must have missed my last email, which asked for the removal of moral rights clause. At this point, I also CC'd Analog's editor as they're in the loop. I recently learned they weren't being informed of any contract issues, so this gets weird again. So there's a corporate that is making these contract issues, and the editors themselves of the magazine aren't even aware of what's going on. This is crazy. Now we're into June. Again, we're going further. She accepts their modified clause in lieu of the standard termination rights. At that point, they respond with a rejection of my rewording. So this is back to it. Contracts responds again, unsigned, assuring that me in the U.S. waiving moral rights is not a big deal anyway. This is what I thought at first also. And she says, it's true. I've done my research, and I know that U.S.-based authors is a little different depending on the state, but moral rights aren't that much of a thing there. That's very true. I am also based in Canada, where moral rights are much a thing. And now I'm angry at the condescending tone they're using to respond to me, telling me I'm not exactly new at contracts, etc. So now we're into July. She gets a response. They said they decided to alter their boilerplate. We'll be removing the morality clause. That's a good thing. I've slept on it. I've come to the conclusion I'm unlikely ever to see the contract from them that I'd be willing to sign. I officially withdraw my story at this point on July 12th. I do think it's positive that they want to work with me on this. I don't think it's quite enough. I've continued to consult with Sci-Fi and other colleagues as we believe this is bigger than a single writer's contract, and this is what appears to be the case as well. So on 23rd, they said they've received notes and are working on a revised contract. 25th, they say they've got a revised contract. The contract arrives later. August 1st, she consults with other people in the industry on this. There's still much here that doesn't work, including their request for dramatic rights they aren't likely to use anytime soon. That's dramatic retellings of this. Pretty interesting stuff on this. Rights to media yet to be invented, they put in there, which is a thing that they don't want to grant. Very interesting on that. So this is them trying to, and this is what they're trying to do, is extract, it seems, rights to, like, sell off different, like, audio dramas or video productions or AI productions maybe of these stories in a different type of medium to become like a licensing house for the actual story, rather than allow the author just to print their story. Now, this is pretty different than is standard for any of the industry because, of course, the author usually has the rights to their own story. If somebody wants to make a movie of it, that's a thing the author gets to do, not Analog, over a few $100 that they pay to the author. So maybe they're trying to get out of the magazine industry because they know it's failing and trying to, like, obtain all these rights and become a rights clearinghouse. A lot of publishers do this, especially in the comic book industry. You sell a lot of your rights. I've dealt with some situations there at least some friends have, who have had companies actually fund their comic, and it's like they're actually funding comic art. So there's a lot of thousands of dollars involved in that to actually publish it and the like, which does a lot more on that level. But you end up selling your rights to the whole story to them by agreeing to that, and so you've got your fee. Well, if they want to make a movie of it, you're out of luck, and that's kind of where they're at. This is by the way, that's Skybound Entertainment. If you they have a pretty bad contract language over there, but the comic industry is so small, a lot of people accept it. Yeah, and I'll just call them out. So that's it. This is untransparent. They still haven't responded. August 14th, I reach out, ask when I might be able to hear back from them. They respond asking for more time. Key players are busy with Worldcon stuff. They asked to get back to me the following week, and she's yet to hear from them at this point. It's been 7 months since the acceptance without a contract that's out there. So at this point, she is now saying that I'm trying to find my thing. It's her. There we go. That this is it. And she says, I wish I could see I'd received a contract at this point, and this is September 4th now. That is not the case. It's been like almost a year. This is nuts. 4.5 months into contract negotiations. She kind of wants to stick it out a little longer, but she's at this point going, I'm giving up on this because it's absolutely crazy. Not until one day, short of a month since I passed the contract notes, I wish I could say their response was worth their weight. Rather than proceed as you might expect from someone who assured me they wanted to work with writers, they simply concluded their negotiations with me altogether. So I guess they pulled out at this point. So if I had any regrets, I initially sent the story to an anthology, wound up pulling it for Analog, and I didn't take the advice given to me early in childhood by a country music legend, know when to walk away, know when to run. So she thought that they actually wanted to work with her, and unfortunately they had not been forthcoming during that whole situation. Now, I saw this same problem. I actually reached out to an author talking about this, and if you don't know, this is Analog SF right here. The author I talked to had been published by them under their prior regime in the past, and had, of course, relations with the editor there. Messaged them, emailed them, and the editor said they would not send out the boilerplate contract to him so he could submit, because he said, I'm not even going to submit until I see what the contract is, which makes a lot of sense. They won't even they won't send that out because they're afraid people will see it, I guess. Now, if that's the case, you kind of know something's wrong, and that's exactly what's going on here. Like I said, I wanted to just be pro Analog and pro Asimovs in this situation because it seemed like they were struggling. It seemed like they were trying to reinvent like how to actually make a fiction market work, and unfortunately these people are being very, very shady in the process. So this is wild news right now, and of course a lot of authors in addition to this author right here are now saying they're no longer submitting to these magazines, that they're done. This is a very, very destructive thing for the science fiction and fantasy short fiction market overall. I'm surprised this impasse has been reached like this. Leave a comment down below. What do you guys think about this? Have you even been reading Analog Asimov's fantasy and science fiction in recent years? I think it's fallen off so much that it's really sad on that level. What can be done to make it great again? Do you guys know? Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you guys. Please check out Justified Saga of the Nano Templar in the description below. This is great science fiction, and I own all the rights. It's great. We'll be back soon.